All right, we're going to call this special meeting to order, October 29th, 2025. It is 5:30. We have 4 board members present. We have Board Member Schmidt, Board Member Zimmerman, Board Member Sorrentioni, myself, Chris Kenyon. And that is 1.1. Let's go ahead and move to 1.2, which is Pledge of Allegiance. Board Member Schmidt, could you lead us, please?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. That'll take us to 1.3, approval of the special meeting agenda.
I make a motion to approve the special meeting agenda form consistent with board policy 1-302 and temporarily suspend governing board policy with this agenda may be inconsistent.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We'll go ahead and take a vote. Board Member Schmidt,
Aye.
Board Member Zimmerman,
Aye.
Board Member Sorrentioni,
Aye.
and myself, I'm also an aye, so that passed 4-0. It's going to move us to item 2.1, approval of the consent agenda. Do we have any comments? We can take a motion.
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We'll go ahead and take a vote. Board Member Schmidt,
Aye.
Board Member Zimmerman,
Aye.
Board Member Sorrentioni,
Aye.
myself, Chris Kenyon, that's also an aye. So that show that pass, consent agenda passes 4-0. So that'll take us to general business. So item 3.1, discussion possible action for governing board to receive legal advice on interim superintendent process. We have Miss Susan Siegel, our legal representative here on Zoom, I think.
Yes, you do.
All right.
I think do you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, good evening, board members. There really is a minimum amount of legal advice I can give you. I can give you some practical advice, but I will stick to the legal advice. It's up to you. You're the masters of the ship. You can decide to use it. And pardon me, I have my son's dog here, and you can use the an outside firm. You can use conduct an internal search. I have only had one school district that's done an internal search, and that was a school district with an HR director who had the time to do it, who really rocked it as an HR director. I don't know, from what I know of your district, that you have the bandwidth to do that right now. Plus, your staff is stretched thin, and you're asking staff to participate in a search for who could be their supervisor in the future. I really suggest that I'm not making a pitch for any search firm, but I really suggest you not do it internally. You aren't equipped to do that with respect to personnel, and it can get thorny. For example, say you say, okay, we're going to have Dr. Mahorn do this search, or we're going to have XYZ employee do this search. You know, they have to go into Google, they have to research background, they have to find out all of the good, the bad, ugly about the candidates. I don't think you want to put it on any of your existing personnel. So maybe it's legal advice, maybe it's practical experience of all my years of doing this. I suggest you not put this additional burden on your personnel. That's my only pitch for that. Some of it may be legal, some of it may not. Do you have any questions of me?
Does any board member have any questions for Ms. Siegel?
I do.
Go ahead, Ms. Zimmerman.
Ms. Siegel, this is Ms. Zimmerman, just so you know.
I see you there.
Oh, okay, you can see us. Yeah, I had several questions. One of my questions was kind of already what you addressed, was having our staff essentially look for their next boss. And I felt that that would create a conflict of interest. My also concern would be for the board or the board president to do it, as I believe that would also be a conflict, them interacting with the candidate ahead of time. Would you agree that that would also be a conflict?
I don't think it's a conflict of interest. There's no financial involved under Title 38, but I do think it's a bad idea in capital letters with an exclamation point.
Okay, I'll take that. Thank you.
The point is, here's the deal. I mean, the board president has to vote along with the rest of the board. The board president is nothing more than a board member.
Correct.
And I think it's a bad idea for the board president to be involved in the search, because that's a predetermined outcome. And I think you need to have some space between the managers of the company, which is you, and the company is the school district. Sorry to use corporate examples, but I think it's a bad idea.
Okay. I guess my next question, in your experience, would you suggest that we pursue an interim for such a short amount of time, considering the cost, because essentially you've said, it's probably not a good idea for our staff to do it. It's certainly not a good idea for the board to do it ourselves. How do we achieve that? And then kind of as a follow-up, are there companies like ASBA that pre-vet candidates that are already pre-vetted, essentially, that we could choose to interview? Because in December of 2017, that's what this district did. They didn't do a search for an interim. They basically appointed somebody that from a list that ASBA gave them.
I'll try to take both those questions in order.
Okay.
It's October. The season for hiring a new superintendent really becomes open in mid-spring. People know who are retiring, know that they're retiring and what they're willing to do. I think it's a little early to jump into that right now. You guys have been into a lot of rough spots. It's been a tough year for the board and for the district. And I don't know from my experience this is the right time to do it. There are companies that pre-vet, and there are some companies nationwide that have retired superintendents that are willing to move out to Arizona, preferably not in the summer, but are willing to move out to Arizona to help you out. I don't know whether any of those companies have given you any indication of success, but I think right now you've got to get stability in your district. And right now it may be too soon to be going out. I would ask Paul Teig from ASA if it's the right timing. I mean, there's a lot of very good retired superintendents who are willing to give you their expertise without looking forward to becoming a permanent soup. And there's others that want to become a permanent soup and want to do the others. That question about when the market is ripe is something for Paul Teig from ASA.
Okay, I was just wondering if if you knew if ASBA had ones that are pre-vetted, since we just paid our dues, which was $10,000. So I was
For
just thinking,
ASBA,
yeah, or to be a member.
I don't know that answer. Pardon my son's dog. But I don't know the answer for that. That would be something to call Ellen White at ASBA and find out if they have some people that are pre-vetted. Ellen is the new executive director of ASBA, but she's been with ASBA for some years. I would call her and find out. The superintendent market is ever evolving, and there's a lot of superintendents that just decide they're going to retire, but then they find out they have a lot of time on their hands and are willing to help you out. So I would call them too.
Okay, I'm just, concerned about the financial aspect. I would agree that we probably need to use someone that I'm not comfortable putting it on staff and I'm not comfortable the board doing it, which inevitably is going to cost money, right? And so, that I was just trying to look for creative, different options for just the small time window that we're in here.
Mrs. Zimmerman, I would suggest that you listen to ASA. You can call Arizona School Boards Association, find out from them. But it might take a little bit more, you're on the right track. It might take a little bit more time than just appointing somebody overnight.
Oh, I agree. I don't necessarily, I just want to be clear for the record that I'm not suggesting that we appoint someone overnight without us interviewing them.
I didn't mean that.
Oh, okay. I just want to be clear for the record, but just somebody that has pre-vetted to try to speed that process up, I guess, is what I was thinking.
There are a few former superintendents that are out there that have filled in, and they are really good. I mean, they come in and they know their expertise, but they have no desire to be permanently on any list to become a superintendent again.
Okay, those are all the questions I have at the moment.
Okay.
Any other board members? All right, Ms. Siegel, I do have a question. So legally, if somebody approaches the board, we could legally vote just to hire somebody, could we?
Of course, you can.
Okay.
If somebody comes out and says, I'm your man or I'm your woman, you don't have any requirement to go through a search or anything else.
Okay, my concern is, and I'm not saying we're going to do that, but my concern is as you said, our district is in a kind of a hard spot right now where we don't have a current superintendent. We don't have a current, basically CFO. We don't have, a couple of these high-level positions. And I think that getting some of these filled sooner rather than later would help alleviate some of the stress that's going on right now.
Yes.
So
Yes, of course. If somebody comes forward, your board can consider them. I mean, that has happened in other districts where some person who's retired or just wants a change of venue comes forward and you can consider them. You don't have to go through a search.
Mr. Kenyon,
yes, Ms. Zimmerman, go
could I
ahead.
ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
Okay. So, so are you saying that the board could appoint a person that approached one single board member? We don't have.
No,
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, I'm not. I'm sorry. I thought you were done. I think if a single board member has somebody that's approached them, they have to bring it to the board. The board has to vet that.
Okay. And so, when ASA has presented previously and when we did the interim search, they talked about the importance of like equal opportunity laws and making sure that, every person that, that it's posted. So can we hire someone without posting the position?
Yes. If they come forward, if somebody out of the blue drops into Arizona and says, I think I can help out Liberty Elementary, then you can consider them. I mean, there is no requirement, as long as you're not discriminating, as long as you're listening to everybody but if somebody comes across, the board can say, this person has the credentials, we're going to appoint them.
Okay, and so when you say that we're not discriminating, how does anybody else know about the job?
They don't. I mean, if somebody comes forward, I mean, I would prefer that you advertise the job. But if somebody comes forward and says, I'm your person, you can consider their credentials and say that they're your person. I don't think you need to have, you're mandated by law to have a search.
Okay, would you consider it best practice to do that?
Yes, I would.
To take,
I would rather you have a best practice where you open it up to anybody and you hear everybody you have.
okay, that's what I mean is if somebody approached somebody, I was asking and we just appointed them and didn't post it, that you wouldn't consider that best practice, right?
Yeah, I would consider, no, my
Okay.
person is put it out and see who comes forward. And best practice would be consider all persons. But, we've had situations in other districts where they're without a superintendent and somebody all of a sudden comes out of the woodwork and says, I'm willing to be your superintendent for 6 months to help you do that. You don't have to necessarily advertise for that.
Yeah, I hear that you say that has occurred. To me, that sounds concerning personally, but that's my
It's
personal opinion, and it obviously will be the will of the board.
Yeah, but I would not, look, ARS 15502, 503 says only you, pardon my son's dog, but says only you can hire employees. Only you, the board. And so whatever comes forward, you have to consider their qualification.
Yeah, I'm
Did
just
that
trying
come
to.
out clear without the dogs barking?
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
Hold on, let me close the door. Zippy, come.
Ms. Zimmerman, has she answered your question?
The point is, the best practice would be to advertise and get everybody forward. But if somebody comes forward that just rocks you on their credentials and everything, still the board is the only one that can consider that, and the board is the only one that can hire.
Sure. So if a person were to reach out to one board member, is the expectation that that board member, send that email to the board secretary for that to be disseminated?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Siegel? All right. Thank you, Ms. Siegel. You're welcome to stay on if you would like. Our next agenda item is 3.2. This is the ASA, or Arizona School Administrator's presentation relating to the permanent superintendent search process.
Okay, I'm going to sign off right now. Is that okay?
All right, yes, thank
You
you.
want me again, I'll be here at home
Okay, thank you, Ms. Siegel.
without the dog barking. Sorry.
All right, we have, I believe, Dr. Nicholas Clement and Paul Tye with the ASA.
Good evening.
No, not quite.
I see a green light. There we go.
Now it's on.
Now we're good. Well, good evening, Mr. President, members of the board, staff, and guests. It's a pleasure to be back here again. I thought when I retired as a superintendent, I wouldn't be at board meetings. Now I've been twice in a month, so it's great to be here, and happy to be here on behalf of ASA. As you might know, I'm the executive director. I did bring an esteemed guest and introduce him in a minute. So last time I talked a little bit about a typical search process to try to help you with your decision making on what direction you would go for superintendent. I'll give a little different slant on some of the same information I provided before. So, you know, this was some of the same stuff that I shared with you before about what I think are best practices and what you would want to look for in a search firm. Just, you know, the question here at the top, why ASA? And, you know, just to know what our role is and how we got into the search business. Our primary role is to do a lot of professional development, mentoring, support, awards recognition, leadership development, aspiring leader programs. That's really what we do. However, a few years ago, we were asked, and I should say also district support services, executive coaching, strategic planning, we do customized stuff. So long story short, we were asked to help a district and another district with a superintendent search. And I said, well, certainly we can do that. But by no means is that our primary goal or mission. Our mission is to support and develop excellence in educational leadership. However, we have the expertise and have had very successful searches. I gave you a list of ones in one of the attachments over the last 3 years. But just know that we're not in it for profit. We're not like trying to make money on it. It's a service. So we're a nonprofit 501c3, been around since 1971. And, you know, our objective is to help districts so we can help kids. So we help leaders, we'll help boards, we'll help whoever asks for help. So I think it's important just to know why we're doing this is not that we said we're going to do searches. It was if we were asked, and if we can help, we help. And so if we can help Liberty, we're more than happy to do so. And, you know, have helped you with other things in the past, and we'd be happy to help with a permanent superintendent search process. And, you know, just know that I know cost, Zimmerman was talking about, you know, costs and things like that. We're very mindful of that. We price it at cost. We don't, you know, there's no markup. And so that's where selfishly I could say, you know, I really don't want to do searches because I do a lot of work behind the scenes, but it's not a revenue stream for ASA, but it's a service we provide. And I should note too, we do outreach nationally. And, you know, even in light of some of the conversation with Ms. Segal, and I've known her a long time, highly regard her as an attorney, you know, we do bring in a lot of national candidates, as you've seen. Even with a very short posting, we can get national outreach. But, you know, there's always times when that doesn't work. And we really know our people in Arizona because they've been members, we've grown them, we really know them. And when Ms. Segal was talking about interims, you know, we know the people she's talking about. You know, this is something similar I shared to you last time as well. You know, the outcome goal, and when we're involved in a search, we really value, you know, a transparent process. But I have to note, it's not our process. We recommend this is a standard process, but we tailor it to what the board wants. It's and I say, you know, more than just the board. You represent the community, a lot of the communities here and the staff. It's for your community, and so we would want it to be very transparent, but also very collaborative and get stakeholders involved as much as possible. And, you know, that's something we value and would certainly try to impress upon you throughout the process as a goal. And ultimately, you know, we want what you want, the best leader for your district. And then we also offer the support afterwards to help him or her be successful after they get the position. So, Dr. Clement he's done a lot of searches, and I don't want to age him, but he is a highly successful superintendent. He's a professor at Northern Arizona University, and, you know, I'm proud to work with him and to introduce him to you this evening. So Dr. Nick Clement will talk a little bit more about the search and draw upon the experiences of the many searches he's done, both for ASA and previously directly with districts and also with ASBA, and that's a partner of ours as well. So.
Thanks, Paul. I'm honored and humbled to be here, members of the board, community. I grew up in a very small town in Michigan, and my goal in life was to be invited to my friend's home. One, both myself and my mom got a break, and I got to ride a different bus. And because of distance, I always got to stay overnight. So to be invited to your home is an honor because it's your home. As Paul said, this is your search. We're here, if we get selected, to consult, to recommend, but it's your search. So let me do I retired as a superintendent in Tucson at Floyd Wells at 11 years ago. And I wasn't ready. Well, you know, when the dog hides the leash, you know you've got to go out and find some other things to do. And you know, I love my wife, but she said, you got to find something to do because you're driving me crazy. So about 9 years ago, one of the things that I did, I started doing searches. And I've done 25, give or take, searches since then, both for ASBA and ASA. And I've done one of the largest districts in the state, Tucson Unified, and a couple years ago I did one of the smallest, Sentinel, Arizona. Every search is unique. Every search is personalized to the needs of the community. So let me give you just a little bit of an overview. I developed this because it really is kind of big picture, but it gives you that timeline. There are 6 phases to a search. The first is the developing the profile and the timeline, and we do that collaboratively with the board and a point person, a contact person in your district. And then phase 2 is where we post it. And we also, if the board chooses, to do a community survey. And also based on some of your needs, we could also do focus groups with your faculty, staff, community. I did that with Tucson Unified. It was very successful to gather data. You've got to have input as far as the profile and what are the strengths that folks are looking for in that next leader. Phase 3, also during this phase 2, my job as the facilitator is also to do my due diligence. That's where I do internet searches. I find if there's information that is collaborated and is important data information for the board to know, I find that to the best of my ability. In our searches, the board, we don't do a pre-screening, but we do that due diligence and bring that information to the board so they can consider that information along with the application. So applications that meet the deadline and meet the minimum requirements set by the board, we bring those so you see them all, but you also see my due diligence. Because what I do is if I find something and it's relevant, I print it. And during the screening process, the board sees all that information. Okay. Then in phase 3, the board does that in executive session. And then in phase 4, the candidates are interviewed by the board. So you go from an applicant, to a candidate. And then in phase 5, the board identifies finalists, and we set all this up with the board and the community. We recommend another interview. We also recommend some type of community forum, which involves questions being submitted, and if I'm the consultant, I facilitate that. In the board, we recommend attend it, but attend it as an event. So it's not a formal board meeting. And one of the things that I will do for you is, and I'm not your legal counsel, but what I do is make recommendations as far as open meeting law. I was a superintendent for 9 years. And I do board training and things like that. So my job is to help you make sure that we're following the law as far as open meeting and that sort of thing. And again, it's recommendations. And I stay in my lane as far as not being your legal counsel. And then in phase 6, you identify, phase 5, you identify a finalist, if you so desire, to enter into negotiations with, and then we step out of the picture and you work with your legal counsel to develop the contract, okay? I developed this about 5 years ago because boards and community kind of said, okay, what decisions are recommended in exec session and which decisions are in open session? So I developed this rubric, and basically I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but this gives you the big picture as to, when we talk about transparent, there are some things that you want the best qualified pool, okay? So the application process is confidential because you don't want the possibility of the applicant's name to go out, which would deter that person from applying, okay? So that application process is confidential, and if ASA, if you choose ASA to do this, we do all of that. The application is online, but it goes to our website, and then what happens is, and I can then start doing due diligence in real time. So as applicants apply, I can start doing my due diligence. And then when we do the screening, we bring a hard copy of that completed application to the board. In fact, we bring, if there are 10 applicants, we bring 10 times 5, so that you each have your packet to review. So here's an idea of what's in exec session and what is in open session, okay? So I'm not going to go through all of these, but this is a team approach. And again, I won't, if I'm your search consultant, I will go through your normal protocol for communication to the board. Okay. Let's say there's a question during the process. You talk to your point person, and then the point person would communicate with me. Okay. So we follow your normal protocols to avoid violation of open meeting law and that sort of thing. Okay. But during this process, I'm yours 24/7. Okay. As questions come in, I will get the answer, or I'll say it'll take me a couple days to get the answer, or that's really important that we form that smooth communication between the board and the search consultant. Okay. I think I went most. Here's some recommendations based on my previous experience doing searches, and I apologize if it sounds like we're being directive, but they're recommendations. One is, once that search officially starts, what we're recommending is that there be a moratorium on communication with the media from individual board members. That I become your spokesperson for the search. Just the search, not your communications. I'm not trying to take over your communication person's position or anything, but that keeps us all on the same page. Okay. Another recommendation is that once the search starts officially, that the board members not contact potential applicants. And the reason for that is you don't want someone thinking they have an edge, and then you get let's say a lawsuit later on that says, oh, this candidate, I didn't get selected, but that candidate talked to a board member. And in fact, the application says specifically you are not to contact a board member. Same thing goes two ways. We're asking that you not contact potential applicants during the search process. Okay? So, probably way more information than you wanted or needed, but are there any questions about my part of this presentation?
May.
Any questions? Yeah, board members.
I think one question a lot of us probably actually have is, when do you suggest like timeline starting?
Okay. So that's a great question. And I have started searches in November that were successful. I have started searches in January, in February. I used to think that there might be a sweet spot, but there is for example, not the sweet spot is March and April.
As in too late.
Because
obviously.
folks, superintendents have signed their contracts. They've already made their commitments and so you want to get it between now and February would be my recommendation. Yeah, please.
Are you saying now through February as in like phase one, or it needs to be posted now in between February?
So I would say to start, if you start the process, it takes the next, if you choose ASA, I would come to a meeting and we would have done some work with your district to develop a draft of the posting. So let's say that's in November and we get the posting done in December-ish. My recommendation is that you post for a month. That provides opportunity for the applicant to get all their transcripts and all that together. And then complete the process by end of February, beginning of March. Okay.
Thank you, sir.
So, Mr. President, members of the board, if I may also just chime in a little bit, and this is going to be odd. It's the first time I think I've ever disagreed with Susan Segal. I have a great deal of respect for her. I'll probably never disagree with her again, but the traditional timelines have changed a little bit. And I think I told you a little bit about this last time, just talking about the general timelines for searches. What I'm seeing, throughout the state is the timeline is backing up further and further. So for example, tomorrow Pima Unified is screening their applicants. Holbrook just engaged. Cave Creek is in the process of selecting their search firm. Somebody else, Washington L is engaging with a search firm. They're starting that process. So a lot of districts right now are already starting to engage. Gilbert and Chandler are both live active postings. So what we're seeing is the process is moving back because, as Dr. Clement said, that timeline, the primary pool is going to be earlier, and people that have either committed to their boards to say, yeah, I'll be back next year, or we've negotiated a new contract. That's done usually March by April at the latest, and so if you start working backwards, the more time you have, the better the process could be. We can change it, we can accelerate it, we can do whatever you want us to do. However, our recommendation is, don't rush it, do it well, and you can have much better stakeholder engagement if time's on your side. And the holidays get kind of in the way too. So you have to add, when you start looking at, the second half of December, kind of have to add a week in there just for process.
Yeah, Mr. Ty, with my experience and what I've heard and been through a couple of these processes, I think my goal, no matter what we end up, who we end up going with or whatnot, is to get this posted prior to the fall break. My understanding is there's a lot of
I hope you mean winter break.
winter break. Excuse me. Thank you.
That's
The
gonna
winter
be
break.
tough.
But even prior to Thanksgiving, that's when what I've heard and what I've seen is a lot of superintendents or potential candidates are looking, right, starting about Thanksgiving, going all the way through the holidays. And then, that's when they have time with their family. They're having these discussions of all this stuff. It's a much bigger pool than, like you said, if we wait, and there's a number of, I think you mentioned about 6, 7 districts in our valley who are already got this process going, and some of them already screening. So looking at that respect, we're a little bit behind the ball probably of starting. Doesn't necessarily mean we wouldn't, we're not going to try to fast track the end date, but getting the posting out there, letting people know that that Liberty's looking.
And sometimes what we'll do is say coming soon, so we get kind of the word out and then still have time to make sure the profile matches what you want it to look like. And that also involves some of your staff too, providing the right information, the pictures to make it look nice. And so, the profile, which will be part of the application, that takes some time too, to do it well.
Also, each superintendent's contract is written differently, but some superintendent's contracts have a certain date that they have to notify their district, or there's some penalties and such. So that's another reason that, that sweet spot is where it's at.
Mr. Kenyon?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I had a couple questions, and if I'm going to be honest, it's going to kind of fall on things that happened last time during the interim search that, personally had some concerns with. So would the board have full control? Because I often hear that, it's the board's process, we'll tailor it to whatever you want. But the board didn't have full control over the questions. We kind of submitted questions and themes, and then the consultant chose the questions. So would you allow the board to fully choose the questions that are asked of the candidates?
So my approach to that, my process is for the board to identify in open session themes, okay? Then I develop those questions based on the themes and the feedback from our focus groups and such like that. Then what I do is I develop those questions and then send them to your point person to disseminate to the board, and then provide edits, feedback to me, and then I consider those edits and tweak the questions, and then on the interview day, I recommend you start the interview exec session a half hour before you start your interviews. And during that time, then you get to see the edited questions and provide feedback.
Okay, so the board would have, and in the end, the board would have full control of the questions.
Yes.
Okay. That did not occur previously. There was also some concern about actually, let me back up. So let's talk about the due diligence and the research. Is that 100% done? Like given to the board, no matter what you find?
Yes. If I get collaboration, if I find two sources,
Okay.
if I find a source, then I want it to be, I don't want it to be false information.
Sure, of course.
And then that information, good, bad, or ugly, is provided to the board prior to the screening process in exec session.
Okay. Do you conduct reference checks?
So normally what I do is I do reference checks on your candidates So, but there have been circumstances where I have done some reference checking on validating, verifying the application. Okay.
Okay.
We also do, for your finalist, we do a third-party total background check where there's verification of degree. There is, if there's any criminal misdemeanors even pop up, it's a, what's the company? Universal. We do that with your finalist.
Okay. Do you contact their current employer?
Yes. Well, the third party does. I also will do reference checks for your candidates, which oftentimes is the former employer. Okay. The reason now in the application, if they check that they were not to contact their references or their former employer, we don't. But that becomes a bit of a red flag that you need to consider.
Yeah. I mean, so do you provide those reference checks to the board?
For the candidates, yes.
Okay. And so you're providing them, like, do you have a form that you use and who you talk to and that you verified their employment, that they're not on leave, paid administrative leave, things like that?
Yeah. There is a part of the application that deals with whether they're on leave or assigned to home. Have you ever, what's the language? Have you ever, yeah, have you ever been terminated, placed on leave? And we have a check mark that all the answers are truthful. I have had searches where there was fuzziness, and I actually went to board minutes to determine whether that person had been put on leave or not. And I provide that at that screening. So the idea is for you to have as much information prior to the screening.
Yeah, I guess, my concern is that we're relying on the candidate to tell us if they're on administrative leave. And if we are not verifying, if they say, I don't want you to contact my employer, and we don't verify their employment.
So I provide that information to you. And
So if they say, I apologize, if they say they don't want you to contact their employer, you do not verify their employment currently.
I follow the application. If they check that, it's rare. But I also provide the board a spreadsheet prior to the screening of your minimum requirements, and then if there is something that I found in my due diligence, I will indicate that on the spreadsheet and then have a file folder with a printed copy of that article. Let's say they had an article in a newspaper that indicated something that the person had done that is relevant to the screening. I verify it and then provide it to you. Because I think what you're getting at, and it's very true, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So during this screening, in order to meet your goal, you're trying to predict that leadership behavior. And it's not a perfect science, but my experience is that the more due diligence I do, the more information that the board has, the better they can make their decision on who goes on to candidacy and then who goes on to being the finalist.
Okay. I also had a question about the whole board receiving information from the consultant. So, based on a FOIA that was obtained from the previous search, the consultant often only communicated with the board president, and that information was not disseminated to the rest of the board. And then when I sent the consultant an email, he said he needed to send everything to the whole board, which I agree with. But my concern is that when the president, because the president would come in and say, oh, we have 13 applicants, or we have such and such, and we had never heard anything like that. So when you say that you're going to communicate with the board, do you mean the whole board?
So I do,
Okay.
but I follow your protocol. For example, if it's the admin assistant to the board, that is my designated point person. And however you have that chain of communication, I follow it. So what my preference is how does the board get regular information? How do they get the agenda? How do they, and follow that protocol so that I communicate to that point person, and then that point person follows your district protocol in providing it out to, and I do that for exactly the reason you just talked about. One, you can't violate open meeting law with your communication.
Right.
And you always have to be, fair and make sure everyone's getting the same information, so that, you all have the same power.
Right.
You have your vote. And so I work really hard at following your district protocols.
Okay. Do you guys provide kind of any guarantees for the tenure of the superintendent, like at least a year or anything in regards to that?
I'll let Paul.
I guess he's going to pass the mic on the hard question. We have not thus far, and part of the reason is that we price it at cost. So if you go with a national firm that's for profit, they have a certain level of markup in the process, and so part of that is like insurance. So if they have a few that they have to redo as sort of a warranty, it's built in. So we haven't done that thus far. But I also, and I think that's the last slide on here too, is just about, I reminded you about this last time about procurement threshold, and if you're getting 3 quotes, you can go over 10,000. We work to really keep the cost down, and if that was something that was really important to the board, number one, we could try to calculate what that sort of insurance would look like. If you want to say, well, a guarantee, then we'd have to look at our cost structure a little differently. Thus far, we have not.
Okay.
And that's with the 20-something searches that ASA has facilitated. But we could consider it if that was really important to the board. And also, just because we worked with you before, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
start
it's
to
okay.
cut you off. The process for an interim was and is different. And in particular, the process that we were asked to provide last time was very accelerated. Like to post a position for 2 weeks was very accelerated. And I know Ms. Segal talked about there's some times where you get a candidate that, and a lot of that's through word of mouth. So like I know all the superintendents who recently retired. I know the market, and I would start making calls and say, hey, what are you doing? It's too hot to golf, right? Usually that was July, right? So, but we want to make it successful for you, whether you use us or not. We're here to help. So even if we're not facilitating the search, we're going to support you and your candidate and your finalist and your new superintendent. And so we're not offended if you don't pick us either, is what I'm saying. But just know that, we have the same goal for you, which is just to get the best superintendent possible. And, I think we would stay under your threshold, the 10,000 threshold. But, if you're getting multiple quotes, that won't be a problem for procurement for you.
And then another question I had is, on the sheet that you had about the different steps, and whether they're in executive session or public session, the final interviews you have listed in executive session, but for the last 2 searches, those interviews were held in the public for the finalists. So would your firm allow that to occur if the board decided they wanted to go that way?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
And
think-
not to, I take every search very personally. And the idea of that getting a selection that is the right fit, and I do keep track in my own mind. The 25 I've done, 2 did not work out to where my satisfaction. There were variables that, but I'm over it. I'm not. But it's just, I take it very personally, and want to make sure that, actually, this isn't my first visit to Liberty. About 10 years ago, I did an initiative on customer service, did keynote and a number of other things. And then some years ago, I facilitated the strategic plan. So I've had a little bit of a connection. The district obviously has changed and such, but again, I take things really personally. So
Thank you.
Any other board members have questions? All right, I have just a couple myself. Some of them were already asked. Ms. Zimmerman mentioned, about the reference checks and backgrounds and things like that. Speaking with other districts, I know ASA has been the ones who have facilitated selecting, finding candidates, and then of course the boards are doing the selecting. But over the last couple months, it seems like there's been a number of districts here in the valley that got a candidate, they were selected, and they've all told me it's per the information we got from the ASA when we sat down and went through the candidates. Seemed like this one was the best fit, and then within 2, 3, 4 months, it didn't work out. And I'm not picking on any person, but they all had this ASA in common. So I thank you for coming and presenting. But I do want to ask, kind of following up with Board Member Zimmerman's comments, you've already talked about kind of the process, but how do we know that what we're going to get for the candidates when we go through their files, we're going to have a good idea of who that person is? Now, granted, our last one was very, very fast. We only had 1 hour to sit down with the candidates. which isn't enough time to get to know somebody and all that stuff. So obviously a permanent superintendent search would be drawn out a little bit longer. But that's just one of the things that I know has come up a number of times to me recently, was the placement, the candidates brought forth didn't seem to match like we said we want, and you've said you want, right? You want the best fit. And so what kind of guarantee, I guess guarantee is not the right word, but how would you address that?
So we try to build in, and again, the design is subject to what the board wants. For example, that the final interview could be a summary of their 90-day plan. What I try to do in my recommendations is mirror the skill, knowledge, attitudes, that you want with this. You're doing an assessment. You're trying to predict the success of this person, and there is no 100% guarantee, but we can increase those, and probably not the right term, but increase the odds by building in focus groups and having the interview mirror what the actual position is, looking at past success as a leader. So it's one of the most important decisions you're going to make. And I take that very seriously and try to build the search process so that you can be successful. And in turn, it's all about your students, because we know leadership matters. And so I don't know if I answered your question, but one of my rules when I was superintendent is don't make stuff up. No surprises, don't make stuff up, be honest. And that is how I work as a search consultant.
I guess the part two, and sorry, because that one was a little bit hard for you. Not for you, that's just a hard in general. Find the right fit is difficult. Part of that, though, is the background, is making sure that it's very, very thorough. There's no surprises a month later after you've already hired them. And so, and in a number of these cases, that's kind of what came to light. So I guess what can the ASA do to mitigate that?
So you just outlined it. It's doing as much due diligence. If I look at my first search, which was successful, versus my last search, which was successful, I did a lot more due diligence on my last search. And it partly is it's influenced by what's going on. It's going into board minutes. That wasn't, I didn't do that at my first search. I didn't go, all right, this person's applying, this person's from out of state. I start my due diligence the minute the application, I get a notice that the application has come in. might be a month before it closes, but I get a copy of that and I start doing my due diligence. So that's one of the things that has changed in my search responsibilities is a deeper dig, a more extensive dig prior to the screening.
Thank you. I have another question for you. If we can go back on the slides, back to the steps. It's the second, yeah, that one right there. So phase 5, I've always questioned this because it kind of puts boards in a bad spot. When we say interviews, community forum finalists, select the finalists, enter into negotiations. I don't for the life of me know why this has been the standard, that you select your finalist and then you start negotiations instead of maybe you whittle it down from 6 finalists down to 2 or 3, and then you negotiate with all 3 of them and you figure out who's, along with the candidate, which one would actually be the best in negotiations as well. Because once you've selected that person, it's really hard to negotiate. They're like, yeah, you selected me, you got it. And I don't know who that would go to.
I would defer that to your attorney because there are both advantages and some disadvantages, but it's more of a, unless Paul wants to take it, I'm trying to stay in my lane.
Yeah, that's a great question. And, you know, that is the typical protocol that legal counsel would probably advise you on. They certainly did when I, interacted with other attorneys. And part of, I'm answering a different question in this too, like talk to people. Like if you want to know, like, what assurances do you have? Like, for example, the board members, 3 of them are still on the board of Saddle Mountain. When I left Saddle Mountain, Dr. Clement facilitated the search, and I think the board was very happy. The community was very happy with the process. I think that will help give you peace of mind. Is the superintendent there a good fit with the community and a good match? Well, he's still there and doing very well by everything I've seen. There are, I'm aware of one search that we facilitated where there's a problem right now, and I can't, give a lot of comments on a specific situation, especially one that's still, attorneys are involved, whatever's happening. But there are sometimes, and this is rare, that even we discover things after the fact that were not honest disclosures. And so, that's something we hope to prevent. And, the other 19 on that list are still in the positions and thriving, to the, trying to think directionally, a little bit to the north, like Avondale Elementary District, same thing. Talk to board members there in the community, see if they thought our process last year for them was good. Saddle Mountain was 4 years ago, but Avondale this last year. So really, it sounds like you've talked to other board members. I encourage you, to do so. When there are out-of-state finalists, and this is really for a full search, interim is an odd animal because every one of those is a little different. But with a full search, I have a counterpart for an association in every other state. And the first thing I do is say, hey, what do you know about so-and-so? He or she's applied to a district here in Arizona. And so oftentimes, this is true for any position, when people put references down, things that they're not going to put bad references. So it's assumed you're going to contact them, right? But you contact other people to try to get as much intel and like, Nick's practice of, I heard it once, I want to hear it twice to start to say, okay, there's some truth to this, and that's something I want to relay to the board. And our job is to get that information, do the diligence, and share the important information with the board, the whole board, and make sure that there's transparency. Even if that's an executive session, there's a level of transparency within the board, and it's a level of transparency that we really value.
Yeah, I guess my point with that question is, a couple of us board members went to a training from the county a little more than a week ago, and that was one of the points in there at that training was, when we get into negotiations looking for a superintendent, it's common practice to just go with, negotiations with that finalist. But the question was, and there was attorneys there was superintendents, there was board members and trainers and a lot of people. The question was, why is that common practice? Because that kind of hinders the negotiating process with a district or a board and the candidate.
I thank you for bringing that question up, because one of the things I wanted to say but didn't was I know of many times where the first candidate who's the finalist that they're going to enter negotiations with, negotiations fail. Something didn't go right and they didn't agree to terms, and so they go to the next final. So there are sometimes, every situation is unique. Let's say there's 3 finalists and the board says, well, we want this one, but if that doesn't work, we would like number 2. Or they say, it's either that one or we're going to reopen or do something different. But I've seen many situations, and it's not publicized, but I'm aware of many situations where the first candidate is not the one who was hired because, as you say, there are times when, maybe this doesn't work. Now we're really getting to know each other. And so sometimes it's not a good fit. But that happens. We just don't really always hear about it.
So I guess if legal was to give us the go-ahead, would the ASA facilitate that? With what I'm saying is, if we have 2 or 3 finalists, we can negotiate with each one of those at the same time, if legal gives us the blessing.
As Dr. Clement said, at that point, we kind of step back. That's really with your legal counsel and the finalists.
Right.
We're really a third party to that.
Yeah.
We're here to support you.
You help us
if you
pick the
engage
finalists,
us, we
then
work for you.
Yep.
We don't work for the candidate, and we don't work for the attorney, but certainly we work with these attorneys, same attorneys that represent most of the districts. We work with them all the time and know them well, and certainly take direction from them. But ultimately, we would work for the board.
Thank you. And then my last question is, speaking about cost again. So I know on that last slide you have I tried to split it up financially, right? 'Cause,
That keeps us moving.
the last slide there where you talk about the $10,000, what do you anticipate this would cost us as a district to use the ASA?
I anticipate the cost would be below 10,000. So we put in a proposal. There's is that Appendix C? It's the last page of the proposal. And the only variable is if the board said, well, we want extra meetings. So we kind of bundle it in a package and say, this is how much it costs per meeting. If you want to do more, there is a cost because it's a flow through. We can't expect Dr. Clement to drive up from Tucson for the fun of it, even though maybe his wife would pay us. No, sorry. The dog would. But, so that's the only variable. And then the only expenses we add beyond the base package is for travel. So obviously having Dr. Clement come, there's a little more mileage involved. I know from personal experience, he's like, I'm not going to spend the night in a hotel. I'd rather drive home late. And so like with Saddle Mountain, I hope I'm not breaching any confidentiality here, but like with Saddle Mountain, a little further, if you haven't noticed, it actually is quite a ways out there. I drove it every day, but he didn't stay overnight. And so then the last piece is those background checks are like $200 a piece. That's a cost we incur, so we pass it along. Now, if you had 15 candidates, you said we want background checks on all of them, that becomes a big expense. That's why we price it out separately. Usually it's done for the finalists. Some boards say we only want it for the finalist, the last one that we negotiate with, but there's a price to it.
Thank you. Board members, do you have any other questions for ASA?
I don't know if it's necessary for them. I wish Ms. Moser was here. Maybe you guys might know the procurement thing. Since we used them for our last superintendent search, is it going to become an issue since it was only a couple months ago and now we're using them again for the exact same thing? So if we do go with them, we still might have to go out and get other quotes. I'm not sure. Maybe
Yes.
it's an email to her.
I think so. And, if I'm being honest, I think it's important that we do that because this board has made it clear that procurement is a big issue. And again, from a FOIA that I received, ASA suggested that we create a PO for $9,999. And to me, that based on the conversation that's happened on this board and the big deal that was made that was suspicious, it feels concerning to me that was the suggestion.
I would concur, and also that it sounds like we obviously, as, correct me if any of the board members thinks differently, but it sounds like we want to start the process soon, not extend it, but really do this thoroughly. So if we're going to do it thoroughly, I can probably see us getting close to that 10,000, if not surpassing that. And so to be on the safe side, I would agree that we probably need to go out for an RFQ. But as for,
And Mr. President, if I may,
yes,
just to help a little bit with the procurement, you don't need a formal RFQ unless it's over 100,000.
right. You need
So,
the
you know,
bids.
but you do need 3, they can be oral, believe it or not, but I would, just to your points, I would highly recommend that you do get some other quotes. And, you know, because you want to have some frame of reference, and that from the legal side of, you know, what do you need for procurement? If you have 3 quotes, you're fine if you exceed 10,000.
Thank you. Does anybody have any other questions? No? All right. Thank you for your presentation. So on this one, we do have a motion. It's up to the board if we want to do a motion or else if we want to wait. We can discuss as well.
I don't know if it needs to be a motion, but we definitely need to get a couple other people in here.
I think we probably just need to do it in an agenda topic request because this agenda item is just essentially their presentation.
That would be correct. And just so you guys know, there were a number of ones that were contacted. And ASA was the only one that decided to come out here in person and meet with us. So thank you. We appreciate that. But, all right. So not hearing any motions. All right, then we'll just go ahead and move to item 4.1.
If the board could get an update on how many companies have been contacted for
Just,
this.
Ms. Zimmerman, I apologize for 1 second, just so I can make sure everybody knows where we're at. So I did say 4.1, but this is the governing board comments on agenda topics or recommended agenda topic addition. So go ahead, board members. Zimmerman.
Okay. If we could just get an update on how many companies have been contacted and, you know, if they have declined to, you know, participate, or if we could just get an update, the whole board, an update on where we are. And I promise I'm going to put them in the form.
On the spreadsheet. All right. Any others?
Can we get an organizational meeting on the calendar, please?
If nobody else,
Already put in the request for that.
thank you. So with that, I would like to do that sooner rather than later as obviously we have a lot going on. And our next meeting is not for another almost 2 weeks, a week and a half. And so depending on what transpires with what we find out with the different, you know, with what Ms. Zimmerman's looking for and whatever's going on in the district, we might have to have a special meeting next week. So be possibly looking for an email from Ms. Camerata, looking for times and schedules when you guys might be available. All right, and with that, 5.1 upcoming board meetings. We have November 10th is a meeting. It's a special board meeting, regular board meeting. It's supposed to be both. November 24th, we have a meeting. December 8th, we have a meeting. The 24th is optional right now on the calendar, but more than likely we'll end up using that. Anybody have any conflicts with these right now? All right. So with that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting as all business has been concluded. We'll show that we're
It was taken care of in 2-1.
show that we're adjourning this meeting at 6:54.